Let's talk about this film. I've watched this 2 times in a row now. I feel like it's such a fascinating film. I grew up with Tanya Tucker's music, and I was born in the '70s, grew up in the '80s, so it's so funny. I was trying to think like other, like what her women contemporaries or who they were, and you show them Barbara Mandrell and Anne Murray.
Yeah, the ones that stood still.
I had albums by all of these people. Um, Country, I grew up in Southern Illinois. Country music was and probably is still more popular than pop, and so this was the soundtrack of my life, and it was amazing because I really didn't know anything about her. I really didn't know much at all. In this, so talk about had you worked with Brandi Carlile before? Talk about had you made music video with her? I think I saw on your credits.
Yeah, and I can also with that explain how this film came about because that's the reason we had I'd known her for many years through other friends and other band Indigo Girls. Um, and and so through the course of time, she supported a documentary that we did through her foundation, uh, based on a women's prison in Washington State called the If Project. And she would go there and play on holiday, like at Christmas, play inside for the women. And so I did a piece for her foundation following her and her time inside WCCW. And then a music video. So kind of the social justice oriented pieces, a music video for Hold Out Your Hand. And then some other pieces put together for things that she did. So we had some creative partnerships in the past. And so when this came about, I got a text from her wife that said, "You want to hear something crazy?" And so I thought about it. I was like, do I? I think I do. And so we got on the phone, and Brandi told me that she had this opportunity to produce this record with Tanya. Shooter Jennings had brought her into the project. And so, of course, it was like Tanya had made a record in 20 years, and they were going to go in the studio, and she knew that I was likely a fan, which I was, grew up in the South. And so I said, of course, I'm in. Hell yes. When do we start? And she said, tomorrow. Because this is often what happens. There's great with her. It's like great ideas, not a lot of time. And so luckily, my DP, Jessica Young, was available. So I said, give me an hour. I'll call you back and we'll make this happen, which we did. And that's always answer a text from Brandi Carlile's wife is the lesson. There's something good that's going to happen. History. Yeah.
I will never ignore a text from Brandi Carlile's wife again. So this is was the record all recorded? Because I noticed you're at Sunset Sound on Sunset. Was it all recorded in Los Angeles?
Yep. And that was they'd never met each other before this. We were all wondering if Tanya was even going to show up. So there was a lot of wondering about it. Tanya didn't really want to do it, as I think you sensed the trepidation through the process. But it was at Sunset Sound, 9 days at Sunset Sound we filmed, and then continued on for the year after that. So it was like January 2019 to
So
January
the whole album
2020.
was done in 9 days?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Is that usual for an album to get done that fast?
I don't think so. I think honestly, for part of that, it was a matter of budget, as a matter of timing. But what they got in the can was incredible. Like by day 2, from what I had heard and seen them, number one, I went around and said, like, I need to keep filming this. Like, and also this is gonna win a Grammy. Like, it was an undeniable, what was happening in that studio was amazing. And the hope was to put that through on film and make it as exciting as it was for us being there. But it was fast. But I think there's I think more like 2 weeks is kind of normal, and sometimes dipping back in, but they made it happen in a very short period of time.
So
to Tanya's chagrin in the later scenes, if she would like to have gone back to the studio, as you saw.
Yeah, Tanya would like to redo everything about this,
including this film. Yeah. I'll read you the text that she sends me.
So yeah, she's
not really. To be clear, she loves the film, but there are moments that she's like, I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
I was in the bathroom when that part happened. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, we would all like to go back fix things
Yeah.
about everything that we do, right? Um, she's got a lot of nerves about doing this, and we see, Brandi has to really kind of like, talk her through this. Like, it sounds great, you're doing great. Was it hard to talk Tanya into doing the film of her making this album?
No, weirdly, it was easy. And she talked about this. Like, we hadn't actually really even talked about this process until we were in Toronto together. And she's been filmed so much of her life. So, for her as a kid being filmed, she had a reality TV show. So, having a camera on wasn't unusual for her. And she's very comfortable in front of the camera. And at some point, she turned around to us and said, I think this was, we were in Nashville filming in her house. And she turned around to somebody and said, knowing we were listening, and said, I don't do anything unless it's on camera. So she enjoys the process for sure. But I think there's the fun stuff that she had been a part of. And then there's a level of vulnerability that was also present, particularly in the studio, that was extremely courageous for her to allow. Like, never once did she say, stop filming. She also has a guy that travels around with her and just films stuff in general. So it wasn't like she's stepping into the spotlight again in that way. She has, this wasn't an unusual process, but what was unusual was recording in the way that she did. And 20 years ago when she did a record, it was all on tape, and it wasn't this vocal comp over and over, stop and start, patch things together. She was like, do it all in one take.
Right.
And so for her to allow that to be seen, and she's a perfectionist, I think, as you can see in the film, that was to me my fear when she saw this movie of everything, that she was going to not want that to be shown. Like,
yeah,
because it was hard for her in a lot of ways making that record. She had lost her parents. She was stepping into something new. And so, but she's like, people need to see that. People need to learn from this kind of courage. So, it was amazing how simple it was, actually,
right.
Truly.
Well, I just felt both her and Brandi were making themselves completely. I mean, everybody working on that record was making themselves completely vulnerable and allowing that to be filmed, because a lot of artists wouldn't want you to see their creative process.
Totally.
They wouldn't
not.
want you to see their bad takes.
Yep.
They wouldn't want you to see what it actually takes to get to the good take.
Right.
All the bad takes that it takes to get to the good take.
Yeah. And that's what makes this film interesting, I think, and it also makes them special people, is that, Brandi believes in sort of radical truth-telling, and Tanya is just someone who is herself 100% of the time. And so neither one of them had anything to say about that at all. It was like, you do the thing that you do, and we'll see it and have conversations about it, but there was never any pushback in any way. I think it was just like the joy to see that process and for people to learn from it and understand like what it really takes to
Right.
The creative process is hard.
It never occurred. So I never thought of Tanya Tucker before as a child star, but when she was telling Shooter and Brandi the story about how she really didn't really enjoy very many of her performances at all, it reminded me of that scene in the movie Judy about Judy Garland, where she was talking about when she quit MGM, or she got fired from MGM, and she started doing the series of live concerts that she did, and then she really got to sing for herself. She actually got to start to enjoy performing when she never had before, because she was forced to, right, since the age of 13. And so I was sort of thinking of Tanya that way. Like a lot of child stars, someone discovers that you can do something amazing, so they sort of push you to the top without any thought about whether you actually enjoy doing that or not.
Yeah. And I think Tanya, once she gets on stage, she loves it, and she loves her fans, and she loves the communing with the audience and the joy of making music. But I think it's all the pressure that surrounds it, because she's, for 50 years, she's been working, And I know that she's enjoyed a lot of that, but there was a lot of pressure on her to make money for the family, and then once you do, to keep doing that. And you see some of her diaries in there, and there's a diary she kept that I have, that part of it is in the film, but she writes about that, and it's from her record deal being signed at 16 up through like 17 or 18, which is the real heyday. Like, she meets Elvis, her hero, and Elvis died. Like, in this window of time, so much went on for her in a lot of ways. So I think there's the balance of the joy and then the pressure. And she's a perfectionist, and a lot of it is live performing. Her band's never getting it right, and so once she can let that go, then she can enjoy it. Right. But it is, I think, it's still a constant cycle today. Even like I think traveling with the film and talking about herself, like it's a lot of that not wanting the attention on herself. She's happy to put it on somebody else.
Right.
And that's just the cycle of who she is.
I mean, her whole entire family being on her payroll, that's a parallel with Elvis as well. And it's really, it makes all your relationships so complicated. It explains a lot about her complicated relationship with her dad, because he was the person that made her a success, but also kind of took away her childhood. You know, she wasn't a child anymore. She was at 13, she was a working adult.
Yeah. And I think she looks back on it with happy memories, but also, you know, you see in the film, that footage that was shot of her at the time, that's like, you know, this is tiring. I am a kid, but this is a lot of work. But you know, I also think that he was that steady force for her, and that's the reason that she didn't make music for nearly 20 years, was not having that guidepost that brought things forward. And I think Brandi presented that strength for her that no one had prior, that made her feel comfortable enough to step into the space and to move forward, which was interesting, you know. And because they have a lot of similarities in their background, and Brandi grew up poor, and horses, like there was so much that's very much the same, and her able to give that strength and that place for Tanya in a positive way moving forward. Hopefully it was, you know, a healing cycle in some ways for her.
So interestingly, this past year in July, up popped this viral video of Brandi Carlile and Joni Mitchell at the Newport Folk Festival. And basically, Brandi had done the same thing with Joni Mitchell. She had pulled a legendary singer and a pretty reclusive person out to do her first performance in years. So what is it about Brandi who's so interested in doing this with like female musicians, like helping them find their audience again?
I think she was actually doing those Joni jams when she called about the Tanya thing. Like that was happening for many, many years. And she told me, and I was like, can I film that? She's like, I was over at Joni's, and Shaka Khan rolls in smoking a cigarette, singing, and Herbie Hancock's on the piano. I was like, so when can I go, after we do the Tanya thing, can we go do that? But I think she's very interested in, as with Tanya, it's like what forms us and why. And for her as an artist, you know, looking at these elements of kind of the patchwork of who she is. And Tanya gave her toughness and a lot of what she does with her voice. And she didn't know about Joni actually until much, much later in life. Her wife introduced her to Joni, who is now, I can see the Joni influences in her, like You and Me on the Rock on her most recent record. But I think she's very interested in not just the history of music, but what forms us and shapes us and what our influences are. And we also live in a culture where, particularly among women, that, you know, when you get old, you're supposed to disappear and go away. And if you're a man and older in this business, you're celebrated in a different kind of way. And I think that Brandi's very interested in paying attention to these folks who she's seen that happen. And some by choice, in Joni's case, you know, and Tanya sort of by choice, but she was kind of marginalized all along. And she, you know, similarly, Mavis Staples, like she's been working with a lot of these artists that we should always be paying attention and listening to, and women have a different journey in the business. So I can't speak for her, but I can, you know, in the observations of what she's done, it's that we can't lose these folks and pay attention to them while we have them and celebrate them.
Can she do Barbara Mandrell next?
I'll see if I'll find out.
I mean, I need an updated version of Sleeping Single in a Double Bed.
That was a good one. I don't know if Barbara's going to be happy of my reference of her in this film, but we'll see.
She looks great.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would love it if she could do all the 80s country music star, Barbara, Crystal Gale.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and and we also may take a moment to, I think, for recognition of the loss of Loretta Lynn and Tanya's relationship with that, speaking of the contemporaries and the other folks. But, you know, was glad to have that's the friendship that Tanya has with Brandi that's formed. And then the next generational friendship is, of Tanya and Loretta, which is a real, true, deep, incredible friendship. And to have that captured on film, like I'm glad that we have that living for folks to see and pay attention to, because their friendship is pretty extraordinary. And Loretta and her family are the reasons why we were allowed to film at the Bridgestone Arena at that show, because nobody else was allowed but us. And it was because, Reddy said, if you're with Tanya, you're with us and you can film. So, that's.
So there's no footage of that show except for what you were able to film?
They filmed it in terms of behind the scenes stuff. They filmed it, but it was never released. They filmed it that night, just captured it. And I'm wondering if they're going to release it now at this point, but yeah.
So what is next for you? Can you talk? Is it top secret?
Angela's like, nothing. That's my girl.
Don't say
investor
it.
girlfriend up there. Nothing. I'm actually producing a documentary on the Indigo Girls. So that will be.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Yeah. So that's happening now. That's hopefully you'll be seeing that at the beginning of next year. At some point, we have some great cuts that we've just completed. And then, I've got other projects that I began before this one that I'm getting back to complete. And then, maybe taking a nap, I guess.
That's good. Take a rest.
Yeah.
As a lesbian, I have to say thank you so much for doing a tribute to the Indigo Girls.
Look,
the most important band of my life, the Indigo Girls.
It's pretty amazing, I have to say. Like deep, and like very personal, very in depth with who they are and why. I think we'll make the lesbians proud. And this, straight, however you identify, I hope everyone's
and you
proud.
straight people too.
But I'm just saying.
I saw them at the Lilith Fair. Yeah. It's deeply ingrained. So when does this come out?
So this will be theatrically released October 22nd. So coming up soon. There's actually, I think, some special screenings on the 20th. But New York and LA the weekend of the 21st, and then nationwide after that.
Are you and Tanya and Brandi doing a press tour for it?
We are. There's a day in New York. I leave tomorrow morning and go do a bunch of stuff, and then we end up in New York. And so we've got some press tours. Bringing them together is not an easy thing, so we've got them together for a day to run around the city and drink some tequila and
of course
do the Today Show or something
with
like
ruby
that.
red grapefruit juice.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, thank you so much for coming to talk, and thank you for this film. It was so wonderful.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, all of you.
Thanks, y'all.